Hey there everybody, thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I will be taking a look at Samplerman's collection of short comics called Fearless Colors. I was really excited to see that Samplerman put together a collection of his work because I have seen Samplerman stuff in anthologies. I think I've got a couple like little small books that I picked up here and there, and I just really love what Samplerman does from a formal standpoint. There's hardly ever anything in a Samplerman comic that actually has like legitimate narrative weight, so you really got to be coming to it from an experimental avant-garde standpoint, coming to it as with an interest in visual delight and also just the poetics of form. So like here, the Samplerman develops a language where he's obviously sampled this face from some old comics. Everything in here has obviously been sampled, cut and pasted, digitally cut and pasted from an old comic, and then manipulated to make brushes, flipped in half to make mirrors, stretched, just put through all kinds of techniques in Photoshop. Sometimes like little dot tone patterns have been stolen from somewhere and just used as a texture to make more images out of. So it's really fun, really sophisticated visual play using previous comics as an element, and then just using formal transitions of color, line shape, things moving across panel, getting bigger or smaller. That's the content of the book, and I just really love this stuff. Visually, I really love this stuff. Some of them are more suggestive of a story, where the collage elements work a little bit more like an old Max Ernst collage or something like that, where you can kind of tell what's going on, but it's still surreal and strange for all of the things that are being combined. And these ones also have what look like sampled and stolen dialogue in them, so you can kind of get a narrative flow, but still, it's sampled stuff, so it's more like poetic and abstract in its nature as well. So there's a good combination between those kind of ones that have like a loose narrative in them, and then ones like this that do have some dialogue, but they're working almost entirely non-representationally, entirely just playing with form. This is probably one of my favorite pages in the book. I have no idea, what it's supposed to be about, this spread, other than just, again, the visual delight and the play, the composition. So I looked at books like this because these open up formal doors. They're not using it to a narrative purpose in their work, but I think people like me who are like hardcore into formalism, but also are more interested in telling stories and making emotional connections with the reader, I can like look at books like this and get ideas for strategies, approaches, things that I can include to push narrative comics further, make them more. Here's another spread. This is one of my other favorite spreads. Like, you could take a composition like this, some of the ideas in here, and figure out how to make a more narrative, emotionally impacting work. These are, to me, intellectually impactful books. They're visually impactful. They're visually pleasing books, but they don't make that emotional connection like a story would. And I'd really like to see some of these techniques brought into that context. Me and Chad Bilyeu have been talking back and forth. I mentioned it in another video. We started off asking each other like, hey, if you were going to do a Marvel book, who would you do? And I said, oh, I'd love to do Doctor Strange, and he said The Rose. And then we were like, hey man, why don't we, and this is just a pipe dream at this point, but I think at some point Chad and I are going to try and propose to Marvel a package deal of a bunch of like more underground artists doing Marvel series or graphic novels, 48-page one-offs, whatever. I don't know what that will look like, and it's going to be a year or two till we even really get it. But anyways, the point is we're having fun bantering back and forth about who we'd like to see on what book and whatever. And while I was reading this, I was thinking, oh my God, and I know I want to do a Doctor Strange book, but I would really love to see Samplerman do Doctor Strange, or I think some of these, would be really good for Fantastic Four, especially with the legacy of collage that Kirby had in his artwork and some of the Fantastic Four stuff. I really think I would love to see Samplerman work with a writer that could bring a narrative structure and then use some of these cut and paste collage techniques in a less experimental way, but still pushing the boundaries, I think it'd make a super, super cool book. So I don't know. I don't think that would ever happen. I don't think this is an artist that wants to do that. They're on their own thing. But that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at these more experimental works, is like, oh, like there's a lot of really great visual ideas in here. How could you take some of these and put them to use? Like this would be a great background for a negative zone story, and then you just cut and paste some previous, Fantastic Four figures in there or something. So that's a lot of the reason that I get books like this. I know, people have tons of reasons, but I want to advocate for people who have a harder time with work like this, trying some of it out and then thinking about, okay, how can I bring it back to the more straightforward narrative work I want to do? How would this be employed in a legacy industry book like an Iron Man book? Like if you had someone collaging together an Iron Man suit out of past Iron Man suits or something. So I think it's really important for all of us who are really looking to push ourselves and push the medium to its limit to look at people in the avant-garde and then, think about how we bring it back into more publicly accessible context. And that's why I really appreciate artists like Samplerman and will go out of my way to get anything they do. So heavy, heavy recommendation on this one for at least the artists in the audience that want to get better at composing and laying out and coloring and all the design aspects of comics. You should be looking at work like this because it's stunning. Plaza by Yokoyama Yuichi. This is translated by Ryan Holmberg and is very large for a manga, so that's a really cool feature of this book, this standard manga size. And this is just a 200 some odd page representation of what Yokoyama Yuichi thinks of the Carnival Parade, and he's just made this like relentlessly loud and rhythmic book that pushes all kinds of amazing boundaries of what comics and manga are, and we could not recommend this book more.